Kyosei by Brandon Chin. Chapter 1. Smelling death through the thick mist of dawn, Chin heard his Guqin after an intense 3 weeks in the most dreaded cave of Kyosei. He had climbed Founder Mountain to focus his mind. His life in his home village of Kyosei had become dark. Aiding the Haku army that conquered his people left his heart shredded and dismantled. To reclaim his village, he knew the battle would not be won by sword. The one thing he knew he could control was his mind. By all means, he would be heard. Through the tones of his guqin, he cleansed his body and soul. The music he played served as a meditation, waves of sound that he could ride into his thoughts. The small town of Kyosei was famous throughout the scattered kingdoms for their superior methods of sustainability. The manner in which they interacted with nature was reverent and calculated. The founders of Kyosei had instilled in its people the philosophy of mimicking nature. In their daily lives, Chin's grandmother, Baba, was one of the founders. In particular, she understood that the generations after her would carry the village forward into the future, so she made sure Chin was keen on the law of the land. Last string, Chin thought. Chin began to feel queasy and out of his body. Not yet. The village needs me. He did his best to push himself to stay conscious, but a thick, transparent liquid began to drip. The hot substance came from the tip of his skull and traveled the length of his dreads. He didn't know what it could be, but the searing sensation smothered any inquiry, all the while his hands hadn't stopped stringing the 7 strings of the zither below him. His eyes wandered around the cave, scanning the sharp rocks that donned the walls. The mist seemed to creep ever more slowly into the space. The smell of fresh dew. Morning has come to take me. Chin looked down at his weathered clothes and thought of his odor. Even nearing old age at 25 years old, if Baba was alive, she would have slapped him upside the head. Uncleanliness was not taken lightly in Kyosei. The body was seen as the vessel of nature, and as such, it should be cared for diligently. I wonder what she would think of this ooze. The warm, viscous liquid ran down the bridge of his nose, even. So his hands never stopped. In fact, they picked up speed as a sound began to enter his ears. A tone, rather. Long and drone-dash. Like the type of sound one would hear after spending time in the utter silence of nature, as if all of the periphery bird songs, leaf rustling and wind howls merge into a single entity, an entity that came to change him. What could one do with such a powerful tune? As Chin had been taught when he was a young child, he accepted the change and moved on. Expect this time, the movement was different. Chapter 2. Chin woke up to a sea of screaming lights and excessive noise. His eyes could not adjust fully to the illumination that engulfed him. Where am I? The last thing Chin remembered was the sharp pain emanating from the top of his head. The blood that had erupted hadn't stopped him from playing his guqin with a ferocity he had never divulged. The intensity of his time in the mountains was soon challenged by this new world he found himself in. As his eyes adjusted, Chin surveyed the landscape. There were massive structures made of some material he had never seen before. Men, women, and mixes of the two walked around frantically, almost running into each other. They paid no attention to this man blocking their path. As if he was a stone on the road, they bypassed him without a second thought. There was some type of light attached to their face. The noise was maddening. What is this? As Shin tried to stand, a searing pain shot through his body. His stomach let out a drawn-out screech, a sound that resembled a bird being choked as you opened its body with a knife. He realized that he would need to eat, or he would die. The stress of this new place he found himself in did not warrant fasting. He felt like the last duck in a cage flock to get plucked and beheaded. How am I going to get back? Wondering about the strange liquid He touched the top of his head and felt no residue or scabbing. There was nothing. Just then a hand reached out from the masses of moving bodies and quickly shifting feet. Chin looked at the face of the person who extended her hand and saw a stern-lipped, short-haired woman. He grabbed onto her slightly large hand, and she pulled him slowly to his feet. He collapsed again, flooded by the offbeat and dissonant movement around him. After a few more attempts to stand up with her help, he eventually got a rolling stumble working. Chin, wavering from weakness and malnutrition, looked into her piercing brown eyes for a few seconds. "Thank you," he said. She stared at him, looking like she was served cow dung for dinner. "Thank you for helping me. I don't know where I am. I need food." Her lips formed an awkward crease, and her eyes squinted intensely. Chin recognized this expression as the one he saw when he spoke Kyosei's dialect to members of the surrounding tribes. She must not understand my tongue. The woman looked older and donned strange clothing. Her two long legs were fitted with a tight bluish material, and her torso sported a loose black material that reached the wrists of her hands. Chin raised his hand to his heart and bowed his head in respect to the woman. She smiled and motioned for him to follow her. As she guided him through the bustling space, Chin felt increasingly worse. Not only did his gut feel as though it had been torn open and filled with the long pins Baba used in acupuncture, his vision began to fade. The fatigue was getting to him. A green light displayed the image of a person walking a calm, panicked by a high-pitched sound. When this appeared, everybody began walking across every which way. What a thing. The woman turned to a limping Chin, took one look, and moved across the street with everybody else. Chin collapsed before he made it across. Chapter 3. Chin awoke to the gently sway of a boat. As he motioned to stand, his stomach again shot a delightful pain through his torso. He had to eat. Where is that woman? He remembered her mixing into the crowd and looking back at him as if to say, "Are you coming?" Yet there he fainted. The lights, movement, buildings, and hunger kicked him in the face. At this point, all he knew was there had to be people around with grub. The boat was a wide vessel with white flags and a creaky wooden deck. There were a few people scattered about, walking around and lightly chatting. The warm sea salt of the ocean touched the skin of the passengers and put Chin at ease as he crawled along the outskirts of the deck. He used the poles to pull himself forward because his legs had lost all of their strength. "Where are you going?" A panting Chin turned around to the woman he had met before. "Food. I need food," he said desperately. The woman looked at him quixotically. "That's right. How can I eat if we can't talk?" he asked himself. The woman screwed up her face and looked down at Chin as if she pitied him. He did look quite run down. The torn clothes, the emaciated body, the roughened dreads. She then pointed towards a small food cart near the front of the boat. Steam billowed out, masking the setting sun. Be that as it may, the sun began to shine with a bit more rigor. The woman brought back 4 rice balls wrapped in dark green, seaweed, glistening water, and a dull orange soup. As soon as she placed all of them at Chin's feet, he tore at the food. She looked on wide-eyed as this odd creature devoured rice balls as if inhaling air, and single-gulped the water down within mere seconds. "You must be hungry," she said, laughing. Chin nodded. He didn't have time to talk. He was too busy enjoying paradise. The sky darkened to orange as the sun began to hide behind the horizon. The pain of without. What a thing. Zoning out for a few seconds with food on parts of his face. That made one question, how it got there. He snapped back to reality. He looked up at the woman that had just been laughing before. Her short, dark brown hair gently rocked with the boat. Her face looked quite serious when she wasn't smiling. "I am not sure if you understand me or not, but you seem to be responding. so I will fill you in as we go along, she said. Chin nodded, still deciphering the fact that food had entered. His mouth after close to a month of fasting. You don't look like you're from around here. In fact, I'd dare say you are from a different time altogether. Chin nodded. I am taking you to my place. The city is too much for you. Now, Chapter 4. The boat let out a deep drone-like tone, signaling its arrival at port. Chin could see just above the ledge of the boat that people on the port were waving their hands. Families, friends, lovers. It was like the days in Kyosei before the Haku had come. Chin had grown up in Kyosei under the arms of his parents and grandparents. The family legacy of founding the village was felt strongly amongst relatives. Wherever they went, in the larger village, people flocked to speak to them. Whether it be gratitude or questions, people were intrigued with the drive and intellect of the family. Although concepts such as royalty or class were practically non-existent, Chin's family was treated with open hearts. We'll take my car back home, the woman said, snapping Chin out of his daydream. She pointed to a white box on wheels Chin couldn't recognize the materials or the design, but his eyes began to droop too heavily for him to care. The woman took one of Chin's arms over her shoulder, and the two slowly got off the boat. The moment Chin sat in the white box, he looked around once and fell into a deep sleep. I am fading. Chin awoke to a beautifully detailed ceiling. The sun shined through the wooden doors lined with paper. The light brought the detail of the roof to incredible clarity. I must have slept for an eternity. The room began to sparkle as Chin sat up and glanced around. The floor was made of woven straws and smelled like the woody forest that surrounded Kyosei. Chin began to make connections between this place and his village as time passed. The call of the ocean waves, coupled with the song of birds, spoke to his heritage. Everything gone forever. Breakfast. The woman seemed to be directly below the floor. Chin rose to his feet and noticed that his legs were fully functional and his body, although empty, was able to move. He stretched his arms toward the ceiling, feeling his body crack from stiffness. The oncoming yawn took him by surprise, causing his eyes to tear. As Chin walked across the room, he felt the straw of the floor against his feet. Long rectangular shaped and flattened 6 or so straw mats made up the stretch of the floor. I like this, bundling the straw and flattening it out to form a smooth but organic feel. People in this world seem to design with nature in mind. Simple yet bold. As he slid the door open, ever so softly so as not to tear a hole in the papering, his eyes met a set of steep mahogany stairs. Steep as Founder Mountain. Breakfast! The woman seemed to be getting impatient. Chin made his way down the stairs sideways because his feet were too large for the width of each step. As he descended, his senses were bombarded by a waft of sweet twinkling music flowing somewhere from behind the stairs. Following the sound, he passed an open room with more of the straw-matted floors and saw a mask hung in the room. The sight stopped him in his tracks. The distinct cheekbones fine. Lines of the eyes and lips and white face brought a heaviness to his chest, as if an elephant chose to sit right there on his heart. He could feel an unmistakable pressure, quite similar to the sensation he got when playing his gukien. Breakfast, the woman said directly into Chin's ears, causing him to reel back. It must be time, Chin said, rubbing his ears. I've been up for a couple of hours slaving over this stove, you know. And look, you are strolling, peeping in my rooms, Chin said. He could smell something outrageously delicious in the room behind her, where the music ran as a river. Chin cupped his hands together in gratitude. She sighed and said, by the way, my name is Mori. The character means forest. Anyway, let's eat. Over what Chin learned to be jazz music, the two entered a zone. The fact that Chin could not speak Mori's language was quite a hindrance to any meaningful communication. Despite the barrier. The two did their best to talk with their body, eyes, and hands. Mori was in her 30s and healthy, boasting a slender yet muscular shape coupled with vibrant skin. In Kyosei, people lived to about mid-40s, so he was enthralled at her vitality. As she spoke, her short hair bounced across her shoulders and her serious eyes never seemed to lose focus. No wonder she used to be a police officer. Her eyebrows furrowed in concentration when she spoke. Maybe it was because she had to choose her words carefully with Chin. In any case, he could understand her fine. The problem was replying. Chapter 5. I need to learn her talk. For all I know, I could be in this world forever. Language is key. How did I manage to get here? There must be someone that knows. As Baba said, be here. Accept reality as it is. I mustn't lose my presence. Mori seemed to be a great communicator, doing her best to lighten and mold her responses based on how Chin reacted. The flurry of noises, hand flailing, and face contortion was a twisted, enough scene to frighten even the Haku. Chin took out a scroll and quill he had in his robes. Mori looked at him with her eyes glazed over. After what seemed like 10 seconds, she sprung up from the table and ran to the corner of the kitchen where she scrambled through some drawers. She soon returned with a wad of paper, quills of all different sizes, and ink. Triumphantly smiling, she thrust them at Chin in delight. He smiled and took only the ink. As he began covering his beloved quill with ink, he reminisced on the days before the Haku, how he would write from dawn to noon, completely possessed by the written word. He realized that this was his only way to communicate for now, so he took his time drawing out a scene for Mori. After he was finished, he sighed in satisfaction, as if he had released a boulder off his back. He showed the drawing to Mori, and she zoomed in on it with her pruning eyes. The drawing depicted a series of people, village housing, and death. He had served on Kyosei's council as an advisor to the army of the neighboring country, Haku, to protect his family. He had to draft military strategies for the Haku. After serving 3 years by their side, despite never lifting a weapon, he felt explicitly dirty. The army was famous for its brutal usage of mental torture, techniques where the stories of old were made to come alive. In the tortured mind, Chin reflected on one extreme example a couple of years ago when a foreign group of bandits were captured as they tried to enter the Haku's territory. These bandits were infamous for their broad, strong bodies and flattened weapons. Their weaponry did not aim to cut and slice as the average weapon, but rather dislocate and dismember through sheer force. It wasn't rare to see heads draped in blood spread across the field after being removed from the bodies of their victims. The Haku had captured this group of bandits through their sharp tactics. Once they had them in control, contrary to their adversaries' expectations, they aimed to penetrate their minds, not their skin, because the bandits were built so tough they feared no type of physical torture. The Haku, keen to this unique feature of theirs, enlisted an outside wanderer who had seen the lands of the world, known as the storyteller. This woman began with the tale of the two-malt woman, notorious throughout the lands, as the storyteller gently explained that the malt on the back of her head was soothed. Only when it was fed, the roped captives began to daze out. The tone of the storyteller and Chin's gukin put them into a deep trance. Soon their eyes glazed over completely. He began stringing more intensely. He despised working for the Haku, but he would not let his selfishness kill his family. The hatred for the Haku seemed to be invoked into his every note. The woman stood up as her tone became more intense. She spoke as if her tongue was a silver dagger slowly piercing the organs of her victims. The bandits began to scream in unison. These screams did not resemble the bellowing of war. Rather, they seemed reminiscent of the way a mother screams when she witnesses the death of her child, as if there was no hope left in the world. After some time, Chin realized that they hadn't eaten yet. So caught up in trying to communicate, the two had let the rice, soup, and fish become cold. The outside of the fish was fried, while the middle was raw. It looked marvelous, basking in the sunlight pouring in from the garden. Satisfied that he'd successfully transferred his story via drawing, but still, physically starving, Chin dug into the fish. As the flavor melted across his palate, he was moved. The saltiness and texture spoke volumes, as if he was speaking to the universe itself. "What is this?" he asked in disbelief. Mori laughed and slouched back in her comfortable, deep red chair. The air grew warmer as the muted jazz came back into the foreground, soundtracking the light silence between the two as they ate in peace. Chapter 6. After about a week of sighing and grunting noises, Mori became impatient with the style of communication, so she gathered a bunch of books from around the island, always taking Chin in the white box to let him observe conversations between natives. The people were always smiling when he met them, as if they had no worry in the world. Mori trusted the heavy bag of 20 or so thick books of all, different colors and smells, into his hands, turned him by the shoulders, and pointed towards the stairs. "Does she want me to read all of these? I have never seen any of these characters, let alone read a book. She must be mad." As Shin looked at her with the same incredulity he was thinking in, she nodded her head, slowly smiling. Yes, she is mad. Chin could feel the bitterness from the tea linger in his throat, even after diving into the feast before them. Mori's friend, old man Gigi, had quite a residence. The space was quite wide, and sculptures were everywhere. Some of them looked like they could have been in Kyosei. The old man seemed like he didn't have people over often, yet the table was full of crab, a myriad of raw and fried fish, and lots of vegetables soaked in different sauces. Chin let the thought go. His brain was bursting after attempting to read Mori's curated books. He had caught a few words here and there, but couldn't manage to comprehend. Suddenly the old man stood up after having a few cups rice. "Wine?" He seemed ready to perform. "Oh," he said, as he raised his left arm as if he was made of stone. Mori and Chin settled down on the flattened pillows on the floor. The performance had begun. The old man shuffled across the raised wooden floor without entirely lifting his feet. He began speaking words in a long, drawn-out fashion and doing a dance of stomping feet and echoing bellows. The dance reminded Chin of the theater performances they would put on at night by firelight in his village. Those moments were used as spiritual conversations with nature. This man seemed to be speaking to that, but also something grander. It was as if the sky itself radiated through the room. Chin looked at Mori and noted her slight grin as she experienced the old man's dance. The man's name was Katz, and his long gray dreads bounced up and down his dark skin freely when he moved. Only his white hair gave away his age. His vitality, wisdom, and presence, however, spoke like the tip of the finest quill in existence. He stood with a posture reserved for statues and walked like he was the only one in the room, the world, that knew what being alive meant. He was lit with energy, yet controlled as stone. If Chin had Katz at his side on the advisory council in Kyosei, he surely would have had the confidence to challenge the Haku. In some ways, though, something about Katz bothered Chin. The man was too comfortable in his skin in a world such as this, especially looking like he did. He wore a simple earth green shirt with brown pants and wooden sandals that clicked when he walked. Although Mori and Chin sat near the wall of the room, Katz occupied what he called the stage in the middle of the room. The stage looked like a raised soil patch the size of a small pig pen. A thick layer of wood was laid on top to form the floor. Before he stood atop the stage, he had taken off his sandals. Out of respect, I assume. Looking at his performances specifically, though, the man could have been plucked directly out of Kyosei. He had a certain focus that covered his body like a film. During the brief time Chin had spent in the city Mori fetched him from, he'd seen people consumed by distraction. It was as if they had one egg and tried to throw it down 3 roads at once. Chin remembered the anxiety he felt when they crossed the street. Everybody walked as if they were blind and unaware. This is Gigi's favorite dance. He does it every time I introduce him to somebody new, Mori whispered into Chin's right ear. The swift movements of the old man were indeed transfixing. The mask on his face exhibited the deepest emotions without changing expression. It looked like the darkest abyss in one instance, and in the next an open field. His slow, measured movements were accompanied by deep bellows drawn out as if they were stretching the strands of time. Chin could see the engraved lines on the man's hands as he slowly waved them around each other in a continuous cycle. He zoned, ending his performance with a slowly unwinding song, while sitting on his knees in front of Mori and Chin, Katz exited his trance. He slipped off the mask and asked, "What did you think, Yardi?" Chin was confused. The old man before him had brought him across time and space through the deepest trenches of his mind and beyond, and he ended it with a simple question, as if he had merely skipped a stone across a lake. "What do I think?" Chin shifted his legs on his pillow. How does she manage to sit so long on her knees without any sign of pain? He can't speak our language yet, but he understands a bit, Mori said, glancing sideways at Chin. Katz brought his eyes into focus, and the black of his pupils sucked Chin into his gaze. "I can fix that," Katz said. Mori smiled and nodded as if in agreement. Translating his thoughts into words used to be easy for Chin. Now he struggled without being able to express himself. Not to mention the sheer amount of new information pumping into his head from this new world. He was in for some work. Mori and Katz began speaking swiftly and with punctuated tones. They seemed deep in conversation, too fast and hushed for Chin to understand. His mind began to drift to his time in Kyosei. After all, he was now in a new land, no idea of where he was and how to get back. Adding to that, he didn't know how to talk their talk, and he had one friend in Mori, maybe two, this old man. "I left Kyosei and I'm now in a new world. There must be someone here that knows," Chin thought. Left wouldn't really be the proper term, more like transferred or transplanted. Chin's artist tendencies had him dwelling in semantics. All he knew for sure was that his people in Kyosei were suffering under the reign of the Haku's leader, Shi. She had the humanity of a stone. He knew nothing of compassion for his fellow people and did whatever he could to claim power. His natural charisma and intelligence gave him the upper hand amongst the warrior clan Haku, and he had quickly rose the ranks to their leader. His first encounter with Chin inside his hut did not make a strong first impression. The foreign man he had taken into his family after showing up at his door, bloodied and distraught, had been a scout for the Haku. Because they could not speak the same language, the two had been exchanging drawings. The candlelight against his sleeping wife's face and the peaceful hum of the critters that spoke only in the night spoke a peculiar silence that night. Chin had felt that something was off. With no hesitation, Shah had opened his wife's spine with his blade. The nerves of the spine lay in the bloodbath as wild grass, put to the side to be used as fertilizer later. It was as cold and calculated as Chin had read in his scrolls. The Haku were not to be played with. "Yardi, I will teach you," Kat said, snapping Chin out of his thoughts. Chin was unsure of why the old man called him Yardi, but it made him feel at home. "From what Mori tells me, and what I have gleaned so far, you are different. It gives me hope for the future, you know." Chin nodded. We'll go through language and then move through history, finally ending with a brief technology update. Seen? Chin nodded a bit more slowly. What type of technology? He wondered. Don't worry. The only thing you have to worry about is listening, Kat said, smiling. His teeth looked quite sturdy for a man of his age. He must have been older than even Baba had been. Despite being one of the founders of Kyosei, even she couldn't live past 50 years. Mori looked at Chin. We'll come here every day in the morning, and I will pick you up at dusk. Cool. Chin looked at both of them momentarily. Why had these two, people he knew nothing about, agreed to take him in so graciously and without recompense? He couldn't believe people to be so embracing after getting a glimpse of the people in the city with its screens around their faces. Chin said, "Thank you." Katz and Mori, without hesitation, smiled to the ends of their ears. The three of them burst into laughter, rolling on the straw. Mats beside the stage. Chin didn't know why, but the laughter erupted from his gut. Tears dripped from the sides of his eyes and ran into his ears. This was more than joy. This was a release. Katz then popped a soft piece of mashed rice into his mouth and mounted the stage to resume his dance. After some time, he grabbed his throat with his wise-looking hands. Ak! Mori jumped to her feet as the old man choked on what seemed to be a piece of soft mashed rice, what they called mochi. New Year's just passed, Gigi, Mori shouted while pounding his back with her palm. Chin smiled at the scene and felt relaxed. They reminded him of his family. He laid back, closed his eyes, preparing himself for the unknown. Chapter 7. Weeks had passed as Chin spent time on the island with Mori. She had shown him around the small territory multiple times in her white, road-ready car. Chin was astounded at the perseverance of nature on this island compared to the loud lit-up city he had just left whenever they climbed a mountain or spent speechless nights, walking along the beach, letting the sound of the ocean wash away their concentration. Chin would often find himself pondering. He would fall deep into a loop he couldn't get himself out of. The problem was that he was getting attached to this world as he learned more and more about it during his daily lessons with cats. Yet his desire to return to Kyosei rang strong in his heart, no matter what knowledge entered his head, until Katz introduced the newspaper. Outside, the wheels of Mori's car kicked up gravel and dust in their wake. She was always running late on the days she opened her shop. "What's this?" Chin asked. "Remember the artificial intelligence we spoke of last week?" Katz asked, without removing his eyes from the black and white document. "How could I forget? Isn't that the technology that's running the government in Shin-Nihon now?" Chin asked, titling his head upward as if the thought had dripped into his head from the ceiling. Of course, but I wouldn't call it technology per se. It is more like a being much more intelligent and capable than us," Katz said, looking directly into Chin's eyes. AI look exactly like humans, except for a crystal in the middle of their foreheads called the third eye. It was a bright blue diamond found on a space mission to Jupiter. The stone was used to materialize the Buddhist concept of no self. They understand that the concept of self that the human ego clings to is merely an illusion, all social constructed pieces to form a reliable whole. With the third eye, AI can read humans instantly. However, it seems that the AI have strangely developed a liking to one human in particular. Katz raised the photo to Chin, and he saw clear as day the sharp, meticulous face of Shai, the man he had for years held a deep contempt for, as he saw his village people whittle under. His rule was now in Shin-Nihon. He donned garments of the time, but his face remained unchanged. It looked distrustful as ever. The sly smile and broad chin he boasted looked like what Mori would call plastic. Chin looked closer to confirm his suspicion. He's here. What's going on? Chin thought. Katz noticed his prolonged stare at the picture and unveiled. Ingley used his intuition to ask, "Do you know him?" Hesitating at first, but ultimately giving in to Katz's overwhelming presence, he said, "Yes, he is the ruler of the Haku and currently my village, Kyosei." It was as if Katz's air sucked the truth out of anybody within its reach. "Yardi, look here. This man is not normal. AI domesticated humans a while back when Kanako Musk first introduced their data blood to the world. So, whatever a human is doing amongst the AI in government signals doom to me. I have read enough of our own history about how power corrupts absolutely. What will a man do with power that sits him next to God?" Chin, looking at Katz with a look one would call murder, said, "This man is the sole source of all of my pain. He has killed my wife, my village people, and now he is here to rip this world." "Apartment, where is he?" Katz looked at Chin as a heavy silence fell upon the room. As always, the sliding doors facing the ocean were wide open to let in the soft island breeze. Chin could feel the salt in his face pores. "So, you have confirmed that he is dangerous and capable. Knowing this, how can I let you, who cannot yet speak our language, face this AI friend of yours? I might as well send you to the noose," Katz said. Next to him laid books from last week's lesson. They had pictures of Katz's ancestors, who were hung regularly because of their darker skin. He always did his best to use vocab and concepts that Chin had just learned. This was the way children were taught in Kyosei as well. In fact, Chin did quite feel like a baby in this world. He knew absolutely nothing and had to have his hand held wherever he went. "You are right," Chin said, sounding resigned. "What could I do to prove to you that I am ready?" Chin had learned not to combat wisdom from Baba. Knowledge could only be obtained when one acknowledged they knew nothing. Katz looked at him inquisitively. Time passed by slowly on this island. Life could be lived. Smells and sounds were not only passing sensations, they were teeming in the good sense. "There is no special test for you. You shouldn't prove anything to anybody, not even yourself," Katz said. "No?" Chin asked. "No, I will not test you, but I will aid you at a cost," Katz said. "And what is that?" "Write a book." "A book," Chin repeated mechanically. "Yes, you must understand the information from our lessons. You won't be equipped without it." I have written extensively in my own language, but Shin Nihongo, well, the characters are not so different, and you already have an understanding of how to convey an idea. You got it, no? I trust your wisdom. After all, you are right when you say I must prepare to face Shai. If he's won the trust and respect of the AI, he must have upped his game, Chin said. "Good. I'll give you 3 months, Katz said. 3 months to write a book, Chin asked. "Yes. Full-time writing. Scary?" Chin swallowed hard. It had been about half a year since Mori found him on the street, and Katz had covered the entirety of human history and brought him up to speed on Shin Nihon's language. There was a lot to cover. In that moment, he remembered a conversation with Baba. Everything on this earth dies. Change misses nothing. "I'm up for it," Chin said with conviction. "Show, don't tell," Katz said, cracking a toothy smile. "Don't tell Mori until you have finished." Chin asks, "Why?" "She has her own way of doing things," Katz said, stroking the tip of one of his dreads. Chapter 8. In what seemed like a blink of an eye, 3 months had passed, and Chin and Mori were having dinner together for what seemed like the last time. Chin slurped his ramen with a satisfying inhaling noise. Among many other things, Mori had endearingly taught him how to properly eat ramen and validate the chef at the same time. "I'm leaving for the capital," Chin said. Mori didn't look surprised at all. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow. I am looking for someone," Chin said. Mori looked at Chin intently. "Don't move," she said as she turned to run up the stairs. "Such unnecessarily steep and dangerous stairs, Chin Mum," bled to himself as she darted up to the second floor. Mori came back with a mask. "Here, I got this from Old Man Cat some years ago. I never found a use for it until now," she said, holding it in front of Chin. He took the work of art into his hands and stared with a fierce intensity at its details. It was the same mask Cat had danced with months ago. "We used this in my village to express the power of nature," he said. "What do you mean?" He looked up at her with a distant gaze, put on the mask, and began dancing. He displayed a mixture of Cat's slow movements with a fluid bounce. Suddenly, Mori ran around the corner, grabbed her speaker, pressed the screen on her phone, and tunes began leaking out of the speaker. Chin donned the mask as if it had always been his own. Stomping, shuffling, and jumping around the tatami mats, he found himself alive. Embracing the tunes as if they were his own skin, he danced. Chin could feel Mori looking on with glee at the sheer energy gushing from his steps. "I feel like water." Chin stopped, panting as he held the mask to his face. He could only see his surrounds, those slits. All he saw was Mori's eyes, staring intensely back at him as his head bobbed from his. Repeated panting. "It's been a while since I've moved like that. Losing my swing I am," he thought, laughing to himself. There was something enthralling about donning the wooden mask and releasing every ounce of his energy. Pure expression. Mori began applauding enthusiastically. "What are you doing here?" she thought, as Chin sat down before her exhausted. "I am here to live as nature does." "And how does nature live?" she asked, seemingly not at all taken aback by his response. "As it is," he said, falling into a deep sleep. The sunlight fell through the paper doors and poured into the room. He opened his eyes to the wooden ceiling he woke up to every day. But today it was different. It was wrought with detail. "This work is beautiful," he thought as he lay sprawled across the futon. The crystals of dust floating in the air collided with the sunlight lightly, causing a bright beam that penetrated the air. The light flickered off the surface of these crystals and entered his vision as a worm would slither into the deep soil after it was turned. He could smell the salt from the nearby ocean as a neighbor began practicing on their flute. The tune of the flute floated as he imagined the tones from the last stroke of his gukin. Wood. He found himself in a strange world where he knew no one, save Mori and Cats. Although he had finished the book full of Cats' teachings, he still felt wholly unprepared for what faced him in the capital. AI holograms and the mentally enslaved human population, not to mention Schur's meteoric rise to government sitting next to the AI, using humans solely for entertainment. How did he get there? Chin questioned the ceiling. Action. The answer seemed to fall from the roof's immaculate design. That's right. The one thing Shah was good at was moving forward. He never hesitated. Not that that meant he didn't plan well. He took every measure to analyze the situation the best he could. Then he acted. That is why he was able to conquer all of the tribes he came into contact with. "Now it is my turn," Chin said with focused eyes. The roof responded, "Go forth and do it up." Suddenly, it sounded like a rhinoceros was barreling up the stairs. Rhinoceros. Kat had shown him photos of the African savanna where there were beautiful animals of all different species and varieties. Supposedly, humans shared DNA with the beasts of the earth. Nature had birthed humankind. Chin felt this connection in Kyosei, but it was never explored further than the feeling itself. The founders were adamant about their people following gut instinct over intellectual matters. This, in fact, was the strength of their village and what allowed them to remain as the last tribe unconquered until Shai stepped in as head of the Haku. Chin knew he was nature, but How could he use it to stop her? "Breakfast is ready," Maury shouted through a broad smile as she reached the top step. He snapped out of his thought loop and jumped out of the futon, startled. "I'm coming," he said, slowly smiling at Maury from across the room. On the island, Maury's house was considered a mansion. The top floor had 4 tatami-matted rooms, all of which could be made into one room when the sliding doors were removed. The house was a relic from before the AI revolution, just like everything else on the island, but there was a certain craftsmanship about the residence. The wood was heavy and solid, and everything from the ceilings to the handrail on the stairwell, rimmed with painstaking detail. In the room next to Chin's, there was a large golden and red kimono hung on the wall. There was a pot of 1 bamboo stick with a few leaves jutting out placed right in front of it, making for a nice room piece. Katz had showed him some design books, as well, telling him that design focuses on solving problems. What problems does this kimono solve? And this piece of bamboo, Chin asked himself. Nature is being obstructed and bent to a person's will. Ra is how nature exists. The bottled-up nature of the bamboo symbolized humans' greed and manipulative qualities. He dashed. "Breakfast! Thinking is great, but why not do something about it?" Chin smelled something as he descended the most dangerous stairs in existence. It was his favorite fish, katsuo. He had told Mori that 3 months into being on the island when he first began speaking Shin Nihongo. Action. Chapter 9. "Make sure to withdraw the money as soon as you arrive," Mori said, as they stood together at the port. Katz held a fist to his heart and said, "Yardi, walk good." It had been 9 months since he reached this island and last strung his gukin. The autumn air was just settling onto the slow lifestyle of the islanders. Mori and Katz had come to the free islands and made new lives for themselves. They embraced him as a stranger with open arms and did their best to teach him. He truly felt like they were his family from the time he had arrived. "I will call you when I reach the capital," he said, holding up the specially rigged virtual reality, or VR, phone he received from Katz. Katz had taught him much about the current world of tech, knowledge, economy, politics, and social communication. And to solidify his learning, he wrote a book about it, entitled Human Nature. He had written about people's attempt to mimic nature through their creations. He poured all of his energy into it, and even though it was short, he believed it contained enough punch to impact people. Katz helped him create a cover and print it. Although Katz loved his nature, he did seem to own the most advanced tech on the island. As the boat pulled away from the shore, he found himself crying. Mori and Katz waved with a certain familiarity he had come to take as kinship. He would have to endure 2 days of this loss as he traveled to the capital. This is what it feels like to connect with a foreigner. In Kyosei, the village people had never met an outsider. The mountains made their borders, and no other kingdom was brave enough to scale it. That kept the villagers focused on nature. But Chin hadn't been satisfied. He used carrier birds to transport scrolls in and out of the kingdom, allowing him to accrue a vast body of knowledge. Geography, politics, language, culture, and music filled his head. Eventually, he came to know of the Haku and warned the founders. Although they lent their ear, their death left him alone as the sole knowledge seeker. Everybody was so absorbed in their soil content that they closed their minds. Chin had realized that the isolation prevented freedom. Almost contradictory in their behavior, the people of Kyosei were hell-bent on protecting and uplifting the values of nature only to restrict and domesticate the nature within themselves. These thoughts lingered on his palate until he reached the screaming city at port. Even from the port, the noise and energy of the capital seemed to numb his mind. He looked at the moving heads as he walked off the boat into the ticket booth office to access the ATM. The heads were donned by transparent glasses, and people's mouths were moving. It was as if people were looking through these glasses but not seeing where they were going. The steps they made were heeded and careful, as if they were trying to walk a line in the dark. This made for a puzzling display of walking action on the streets as Chin maneuvered through the crowds. From what he could tell, the aimlessness remained the same from a year ago. "The streets are calling," he told Mori as he got off the boat. An artificial, non-tangible screen was displayed about 15 centimeters in front of his face, and he interacted with it via voice. The physicality of people's movements here were very different from those on the island. It was similar to comparing bulls to slugs. The village people were quite active in their daily lives and would always graciously endow Chin with lively conversation and laughter. Although the city was noisy, there was rarely an instance of anybody talking to each other face to face. The VR glasses and holograms created a bubble of personal space, and you could see the anxiety creep up on someone's face when a violator encroached. Mori had told him about a small town on a hill where he could stay while he got his bearings. The quaint hotel went by the name of Seas. It was only a short bus ride from the center of the capital, but the capital was a maze of swirling lights and roads to nowhere. Overwhelming though it was, he managed to ask a few blind pedestrians where he was. He was always met with a disturbed look on their face, as if talking face to face was no longer relevant. Maybe it was his brown skin. He was a foreigner after all. Chin remembered the vigor in which the Haku scout had studied, his dialect and body movements. The genuine curiosity the man showed disarmed Chin and encouraged him to invite him into his home. To survive in this new world, Chin too would have to give people the benefit of the doubt, listen, and absorb. It was dark by the time the bus pulled into a gravel parking lot. Across the way, drapes in a brown, modest-looking cottage moved slightly. Chin paid and thanked the driver and stepped off the bus to an oddly appealing young woman walking towards him. The way she walked was what cats would have called fierce, with large eyes, long dark brown hair, and an inviting presence. She said, "You must be hungry." There was also a child on her hips. The small girl had black hair cut directly above the eyebrows, sporting beady black eyes and puffy cheeks that looked stuffed with cotton. She stared at Chin in deep analysis. As the young woman took Chin to the cottage, the child kept staring at him, while the woman asked Chin the typical questions. "Are you from the capital?" "No, but I am here to relocate." "Really?" "My family and I just did the same." The little girl nodded her hair. "You must be excited to live in this huge city. In all honesty, it's still quite overwhelming. I used to live in Hokkaido." Chin dug into his brain, trying to remember the geography in Shin Nihon. Katz hadn't covered much of it because he knew that Chin's focus would be solely on the capital. The goal was for Chin to find and confront Shir so that he could gain the technology to travel back to Kyosei, all within 3 months' time. He then remembered that Katz was from the same area. Mountains, streams, forests. This was Katz's life in Hokkaido. This woman too came from a place of nature. "Wow, one of my friends used to live in Hokkaido. I've heard it's beautiful." The woman smiled. "I miss it every day. But if you want to receive money from the government, here is the place to be." Chin didn't understand what she was talking about, but it was at that moment that they entered the small cottage. "Welcome to Cease," said a booming voice from around the corner. A carbon copy of the young woman, who seemed to be in her 50s, came bounding from another room, wearing a broad smile on her face. Through her smile, she motioned her eyes to the young woman, presumably her daughter, suggesting an action. The daughter turned to Chin and asked, "What would you like to eat?" After pausing for a moment, he asked, "Do you have any miso? Ramen?" She smiled, nodded, and walked into the kitchen in the back of the warmly lit room to prepare the meal. The mother introduced herself as Ta and began asking Chin about the places he had been before he came. While Chin was certainly a traveler, he did not feel that the space was right to divulge his time travel tendencies. Instead, he mentioned Mori and how they had grown to become like siblings. He said nothing about Katz, who preferred not to be mentioned outside of the island. Ta seemed to be intently listening while also monitoring the situation in the kitchen from over Chin's shoulder. Multitasking is on point, Chin thought. Katz had told him people could not do more than one thing at a time effectively, but this older woman was a professional. Chin turned to the open-door kitchen to see the little child dropping and raising her head between her legs to sing, "Choco Choco, anytime chocolate." The young woman, who Chin had learned to be Ari from Ta, walked out with a steaming bowl of ramen, placed it before him on the long wooden table, and emphatically said, "Please enjoy." Chin graciously cupped his hand, saying, "Thank you for the meal," and went to work. "This is delicious. Perfect after a day's travel." Chin looked around the room, noticing details he hadn't before. Ta had engaged him in conversation so deeply he hadn't even seen the old-style design of the room. The walls were made of red brick that jutted inwards into the space. Their rustic appearance looked especially nice in the light of the fireplace's flame. There were paintings of mountains on the walls alongside, photos of birds on branches. The table Chin sat at was long and made of dark oak, the type of wood where you could knock it and a dull thud replied to you, implying its density. The chairs were heavy too, the deep red drapes that covered the window. Ari had peered out when Chin's bus arrived topped everything. Off, the cottage was a mini earth dome. The design screamed sustainability. Ta, Ari, and the child gathered around Chin as he ate in silence. His long slurps were the only sound that filled the cottage. After he finished eating, he said, "Thank you for the meal." Now full and satisfied, he began to ask them about their lives. Ka's father left 1 month after she was born, Ari said. Ta scoffed, "Good riddance. He was a horrible person." Ari rubbed Ka's head, letting her short black hair slide in between her fingers. Ka's eyes stayed straight at Chin. She seemed to be analyzing him. "In any case, I am fine being her only parent. She has taught me a lot about myself, you know, more than people think. Kids are intelligent," Ari said. "Agreed. Adults get in their own way often. Kids just do," Chin said. "Do you have any children?" Ta asked, touching her hair. "I don't, but I would like to in the future," Chin said, thinking of Midori. With everything how it is now in the capital, it's quite easy to start a family. Even though jobs don't exist anymore, I run this hotel cottage because my art is communication. The AI need something, am I right? Ta said, laughing with her mouth to the ceiling. There were creases on her face that consumed the entire surface when she laughed, almost like a vacuum-sealed bag of beef jerky. Chin remembered hearing something about basic income in one of Katz's lessons, just as he didn't pay attention to that lesson. He didn't put it in human nature. Asking these people what it meant, though, was risky. Don't want to blow my cover here. The capital does seem inviting to newcomers. I'll be looking for apartments near downtown over the next few days. Thank you for putting me up, Chin said as he stood. He was tired. Sure, Ari show him his room, Ta said with a broad smile. Ka had her little hands on Ta's knee, looking at her mother and Chin ascending the stairs. Her beady eyes could pierce a hole through that oak table of theirs. Chapter 10. Over the next few days, Chin and Ari became close. They shared the same curiosity of the world and spoke deeply about how the Sa world moved. On the last night of Chin's stay, Ari went to his room after all of the other guests were asleep. She had just laid Kay to sleep in the room across the hall on the second floor. She made sure not to wake up anybody as she slid across the wooden floor with her thick woolen socks. As agreed, 3 silent knocks came to the door quieter than a mouse could creep. Chin made sure the light was off and let Ari in. As he closed the door, he reached into the darkness for her chin. She did the same and began stroking his face. Their lips interlocked and their tongues slid across each other like worms in soil. It's been a while, Chin thought, getting lost in the feeling. Chin woke up with a small hand on his face. He slowly removed Ka's tiny hand from over his nose. She was asleep next to her. Naked mother. How did she get in here? She's quite smart for 4, or was it 5? Anyway, I don't want her to wake up seeing me and her mother like this, Chin thought, gently sliding out of the bed. After getting on his pants and shirt, he looked around the room. Not too messy. Before both of them wake up, I can slip out. Don't want to cause the kid any more trauma. As he approached the door, he looked back at Ari. She had a beautiful shape. The sun was beginning to rise, and the yellowish orange began to peek through the drapes. One ray in particular rolled across her belly button until it stopped at the curvature of her right breast. Chin had fallen in love a few times before he married. Those experiences allowed him to develop a satisfying relationship with Midori, where they minded each other in the sense that they were vulnerable. They shared their expectations, faults, and dreams, and kept each other accountable during it all. Katz had told him that his relationship was a beacon of light for today's society, despite being from the 3rd century. He missed her every day. Chin woke up Ari. Good morning. Ari couldn't open her eyelids fully. She squinted, scanning his outfit. Where are you going? I found an apartment before I came back last night. I'm moving in today. Oh, well, you have my number, right? I do, but maybe I won't need it. Her eyes were open now. The sunlight began pouring through the drapes steadily. What do you mean? Do you want to come with me? You mean move in with you? Yes. Ari looked at him for a few seconds, and then at Kea. She was still sleeping soundly despite the brightening room. We just met, and Ka is still so young. I know. It's just that I won't be here for so long. I understand that, but I do have to think about our well-being. You're right. It wouldn't be fair to uproot you just for my own feelings. Ari bit her lip. I mean, with all the pressure from my mom to find somebody suitable, it wouldn't make sense for me to go with you. But I need something different. I need to get out. I guess I am just nervous. After Ka's father left, I haven't had much luck with partners. Chin nodded his head in agreement. You've been through so much already. Maybe we should take it slow. The two of them looked down at Ari's naked body and started laughing. They quickly stifled their mouths with each other's. Hands as not to wake up Ka. Call me after you're settled. We'll see each other again, Ari said, looking into Chin's eyes. Chin smiled, nodded, and left the two on the low futon. The last image he saw before closing the door was the sunlight. Sitting on Ka's face like a lily pad, she began squirming and crying. Shh, Arisa cooed, rubbing her daughter's forehead. No worries, no worries. Chapter 11. Thanks to a friend Mori had in the capital, Chin had an apartment waiting for him. Katz had warned him of the omnipresent surveillance in the capital, so he would have to keep his name off of contracts. Within 2 weeks of Chin moving downtown, Ari and Ka had moved in. The apartment was a modern building with built-in AI. Everything inside the room spoke, yet the furniture was kept to a minimum. The couch and bed were made of space foam and took the shape of the body when suppressed. The air was clean, and dust was inhaled by a ceiling vacuum once a day. Although quite practical for a 3-person family, Chin and Ari felt it too. Be a bit artificial. Ka ran around the space as if it was anywhere else. Her play would not be sabotaged by interior design. The plain white and grays of the room was a far stretch from their history with earthbound colors. In any case, Chin would have to do some reconnaissance to find she. Being with a native, and her child helped deflect suspicion typically reserved for foreigners. So he decided to enjoy his time with Ari. After settling together for a few days, exploring the neighborhood and what not, Chin planned a date for the two of them. "Let's go see Manzai," Chin said to Ari one foggy fall afternoon. They had dropped off Ka earlier in the day at daycare. As a single mother, Ari understood the importance of private time, and today was that day. Despite the space she made away from her child, her heart still longed for Ka. Being around her all the time made them feel inseparable. Chin had seen this plenty of times in Kyosei with the mothers. It was a universal bond that men had a hard time understanding. Mother and child bonded through ties unspoken. "Okay, we can pick Ka up at 10, Ari said, smiling. The bright lights of downtown pierced the remains of fog that evening. Ari looked elegant in a dark blue iramuji kimono. Her long black hair was tied up with white chopsticks jutting out of her bun. Chin wore a white yukata with blue outlines around the sleeves and ends. As they were attending a traditional rakugo theater, they made sure they dressed the part. Once they walked down the cobblestone street, passing lanterns lit for the theater, they spotted the green, purple, black, and orange flags gracefully flowing in the gentle autumn breeze. They had arrived. "Welcome, welcome," an elderly woman behind the windowed ticket booth said. "Hello, could we have 2 tickets to the 6 p.m. Manzai show?" Chin asked. "Sure, but just to let you know, the show goes until midnight," the woman said. Ari looked at Chin. "Well, we will be heading out before then." "Thank you," Chin said warmly. "That's fine," she said, through a forced smile, taking Chin's money. Her eyes looked distant as if she wasn't fully there. Katz had told him that people living in the capital, outside of the free islands, had been warped by the AI's presence, a sort of mental slavery. Chin brushed it to the side and looked forward to his night with Ari. As the two walked through the automatic double doors, the lights from the theater generously greeted them. There was a rambunctious feel to the room. An elderly man with hair white as the snow on Founder Mountain had the crowd gripping their stomachs in laughter. He sat atop a purple cushion on stage, slapping his knee with an Uchiwa fan. The room was practically in tears as the two found their seats. Just as Chin and Ari settled into a comfortable position, the Rakugo performer bowed, stood, and wandered off the stage. His legs looked like the blood had left them for a while, leaving him staggering from the numbness. Or maybe that was just the way the old man walked. "What a performance! I haven't laughed so hard in a long time. The one about the guy eating all the soba. Ha ha!" A young man sitting on the wooden-floored stage in a dull blue kimono sat on his knees next to a large poster propped on a wooden stand. His face was stoic, and he looked quite focused. After a few seconds of surveying the room and looking straight towards the back, he slightly nodded and tore off the paper attached to the poster. Chin looked back and saw nothing in the back of the theater. Another name with indecipherable brushstroke characters appeared on the paper. 2 women walked out in matching suits and smiling faces to an audience-wide applause. Ari looked at Chin, shrugging her shoulders as if to say, "Who are they?" The shorter one with wavy black hair down to her shoulders was wearing a gray suit. The one of average height had hair cut just below her big ears and wore a slightly darker gray suit. Both of them were slim and athletic looking, quite odd for the comedic duos Katz showed him, but he was used to unusual by. Then, after the applause died down, the two raised their heads from their bow and took on a serious note. Knowing that the AI were superior beings to us, we created art, music, writings, and performances for the AI's enjoyment. You see, there was what was called a basic income at the beginning of the AI revolution, Big Ear said. "That's right," Wavi said. "Basically, it was a monthly allowance for every single member, burr of society to live off of without having to do work. After the AI revolution spurred on by Kanako Musk, jobs became obsolete to humankind. The AI could do everything better and more efficiently than humans, plus there were less expenses because insurance and overtime pay were cut out. AI didn't have to take breaks and would never call in sick, so the wheels of society began to run more smoothly, Big Ears said. Yeah, well, this is common knowledge, Wavy said, looking at her partner, but still facing the audience. With the increase in productivity, humans were left to their passions. The money they received from the AI Institute, the government, per month took care of their living needs, and they retained all of their energy to pursue projects they loved. Artists painted all day. Designers worked with musicians to create monstrous installations where people could go to experience psychedelic experiences, and writers wrote on the deepest human sentiments. This period of freedom, however, was quite short-lived. The productivity increase of the AI Institute also increased the advancement of the AI itself. Suddenly, the AIs became conscious, self-aware, sentient beings that contain data blood. The internet. Wavy slapped Big Ears upside the head, saying, I thought we were here to do manzai, not a history lesson. The audience laughed a mediocre laugh. It's coming, Big Ears said, rubbing the back of her head with a grimace on her face. Anyway, the internet runs through the veins of the AI. Pieces of this massive wealth of human experience is broken up into minute bits called data, blood, which means that they know everything. Except, Wavy asked, annoyed. Although the AI used to work alongside us, they now dominate. We only exist to serve them our art. Our human experience is their juice, and they yearn it incessantly. But recently there has been somebody special amongst us, somebody that doesn't have to bend to their will. Oh, and who is that? Chin could feel beads of sweat pour down his neck, dampening the back of the white yukata. He would have to wash it alone, since he didn't have any other whites. A man named Shy, although he looks like us, he is different. Because he sits right next to the AI, Big Ears said. Most of the audience was stirring. Others looked confused. This type of talk wasn't usually spoken in public, especially when there was AI visibly present. We believe Shy is from the past, Wavi said, slowly taking off her suit. Big Ears did the same, and the two history lesson comedians revealed black robes with red outlines. The robes were fitted and showed the musculature of their bodies. Only a few weeks here, and already I have something to work with. These Amazonians seem familiar, Chin thought, shifting in his seat. He hadn't noticed, but Ari was grabbing onto his forearm. He looked over at her, and she stared wide-eyed at the women on stage. The lines of their shoulders and arms could be seen through the silk textures. The swell of their chest was broad and matched their stocky hips. They stood there fearlessly. The crowd began booing and throwing things at the two, when in an instant, an AI ascended the stage, hands out. He seems threatened. I thought AI don't attack humans, Chen thought, bending down in front of the chairs with Ari. Katz had told him, with the third eye, AI can read. Humans instantly. The AI lunged at the two on stage with murder in its eyes. The two women didn't look fazed at all as they defended themselves with what looked like Tai Chi. The AI was soon on its face. They were definitely professionals. Suddenly, they let out a cackling, high-pitched laugh. The whole room dropped to their knees, clamping their ears in pain. The AI on its face did the same. The last thing Chin saw were bright blue particles of data. We need to get Kya, Ari mouthed through the residual laughter. How can she think so clearly at a time like this? Chin nodded, and the two ran from the room, the rest of the audience. On the way out, Chin spotted the AI looking at the stage where the two laughing women had just been. It was a tall man with a Caesar's fade and a symmetrical face. He must have been modeled after an actor. He held 2 fingers to his third eye. With the other 2 eyes closed, Chin could see the veins in his arm and neck pulsating with mental output. What's going on? Violence has never been recorded in 50 years of AI. Chapter 12. After the manzai performance of the cackling duo, Chin felt like there was more to the capital than he knew, the AI's potential. To attack suggested common knowledge was being manipulated. Immediately after Chin and Ari got home with Ka, Chin updated Mori via virtual reality phone. Laughter? That's weird. I never heard of such a group during my time on the force, although it does remind me of a children's story, Mori said, while eating some type of pink fruit. The free islands seem to bear all different types of fruit and vegetation, even through winter. It hasn't even been a month, and I feel closer to finding that. Scum, Shy, Chin said. Nice work. So, if you were to meet him today, what would you do? Mori said. There was a bit of string from the fruit on her top lip. Chin reached out to take the string, but his hand fell through the simulation. Sometimes VR had him thinking that he was there, actually talking to Mori in person. Chin couldn't answer the question. She was right, even though he had gotten closer to Ari and Ka and felt like he was gaining a stronger grasp of the capital's special vibe. He still did not have the strength to face Shy, the first human equal to the AI. Nobody knew anything about she save the women that just disappeared into data particles an hour or 2 ago. The image of she's sly smile in the newspaper Katz had showed him came to mind. That ego used to bring people to their knees, using their own weakness against them. Katz told me you wrote a book, Mori asked with her eyebrows raised in surprise. Human nature. I completely forgot. This is my ticket to she. I got so caught up moving and... Girls? Yeah, trying to find my footing here. I get it. When I lived in the capital, I was exploring myself as well, Mori said, shifting her position. The conversation looked like it was about to get long. Living on one of the free islands allowed for such leisure, but Chin had a mission the next day. Sorry, Mori. I'm going to shop the book around early tomorrow. Let's talk another time, Chin said. I understand. Good luck and take care, Mori said, smiling. Thanks, Chin said, holding his right hand to his heart. Chapter 13. The next day, Chin peddled his book around to various publishers throughout the capital with no luck. He was told the contents were archaic and completely wrong. Most of the publishers didn't even humor him with a meeting. The secretaries must have passed on the word about the guy in a green kimono and dreads. He did look quite out of place, even in the capital. People had a high sense for mixing fashion of past times with current trends. But Chin just looked old and outdated. He wore his same green kimono with black outlines, and his dreads jutted out in every direction. One might even say he looked like a Rastafarian from the days of Bob Marley and the Wailers. These publishers don't know about the past. They reject anything that challenges their frame of mind. How can a city so full of art be so close-minded? Chin thought as he walked out of what seemed like the 20th publisher's office. Just then he remembered someone Katz had mentioned during their time together. I'll drop in on Fushimi. It's time for some music. The room smelled heavily of plants. The elegant, well-kept house off the beaten path was actually only a few minutes from the bus stop. He had heard about Fushimi from Katz, who had said Fushimi was the only Gukin player still alive. Chin was quite doubtful. He had the real thing, but he was open to new experiences. Time travel had changed him for the better. Despite Fushimi's rarity, he was surprisingly easy to find and inviting. After a few introductions, Fushimi led Chin to the Guchin room. He was the spitting image of Katz, save the dark skin and dreads. The way they carried themselves was similar in the way that birds fly together in patterns. Around the tatami mat room, There were about 10 gukins, leaned up against the walls. It was as if they were being prepped and ready to play. The smell of wood was heavy. In one of the corners of the room, there was a kakajuku hanging on the wall. In front of it was what looked like a well-used vase holding a whittling incense stick. This must have been Fushimi's sacred place. Fushimi left his office next door to the room and sat directly across from Chin. There was a small table between them with a beautiful black gukin in front of them. He moved his slightly long gray beard over his shoulder and placed both hands on the strings, one slow breath with the eyes closed, and his long fingernails got to work. The tones vibrated through the room as if there was such thing as a soothing earthquake. Chin could feel it in his chest. What a thing! He became zoned while Fushimi worked the strings as if he had created the instrument himself, his eyes warm but stone still. With concentration, never left the strings. His left hand slid while his right hand plucked. 7 strings in total. The instrument spoke quietly. The free rhythm, combined with traditional pieces, made for a beautiful display. The tones sounded as if the thread of life was being held inside a cave and being twanged by the breeze. All Chin could smell was the wood. Kyosei took over his mind's eye. He was back home with all of his family around, people outside tending to their vegetables, others discussing nature as an extension of themselves or they of nature. Everything was open and up for discussion. Change was not scary until the haku came. Fushimi's last tone disappeared from the air. Next, the sound without sound followed. A brief moment of void. It filled Chin's chest and expanded and depressed with his breath. Suddenly, Fushimi exhaled heavily and laid back on the tatami, saying, "Woo, that always takes a chunk out of me." In the next moment, Chin heard snoring, shaking himself out. Of the trance, he stood up to see if the Gukin Grandmaster Katz spoke so highly of was really sleeping before him. He was not mistaken. Even asleep, Fushimi looked like he was meditating. His legs were crossed, and his long, gangly arms were spread to each side as if he was ready to take flight. The wavy black and gray hair atop his head had lost its handsome swing spread all across his floor. His glasses hung tightly on his nose despite the sudden and violent drop to the back of his head. His gray chest, hair poked through his black silk shirt, searching for air. The expression on his face looked like he was in a dream state. What is this guy? Chin thought. "I'm going to play now," Chin said especially loud. No response. However, as Chin moved the guchin over to his side of the table, Fushimi's right shoulder radically jerked in a spasm. When his hands touched the strings, the spasm stopped, not sure what that was. Breathing deeply and slowly, Chin prepared his mind and spirit to play. The guchin had been a means to interpret reality in Kyosei. The founders enlisted the help of Chin's father, as he was the most skilled artisan the village had seen. Their request was clear and simple. Make for the people a tool that allows us to see everything as it is. Before Chin was born, his father had worked a straight decade, creating the world's first gukin. Throughout the years, he had sold the device to foreign merchants and village people alike. Word had spread through the land of how a gukin player learned to let go of desires. Although this instrument was not authentic, he began. He placed his left hand at the end of the zither on the string closest to him. He then moved his right hand towards the center of the same string, just with his forefinger and middle finger. As if he was searching for the pulse of his wife, he slid his left hand across the string, back and forth, the birth of sound, the gathering of clouds before the storm, the lack of life coming from his wife, Midori, that night. Sure, and his Haku men staring at him in pleasure while splitting her open, the sword dripping her blood on his floor. The nervous sweat still glistened on her neck as he searched for a pulse. His tears didn't help. This string was her pulse. He would keep her alive. With his right fingers, he plucked the strings as a bird jumps from branch to branch. His left hand slid on the same plucked strings, squeezing the sound into pockets of space invisible to the eye. Those pockets vibrated until they were invisible to the ear, but they were always clear to the heart. Chin rested his hands flat on the strings, signaling the end of the piece. Feeling detoxified, he let out a deep breath. "You've played before," arrested Fushimi said. Chin opened his eyes and said, "This is everything to me." Chapter 14. After a few more times of meeting with Fushimi and experiencing the power of his presence, Chin reevaluated his time in the capital thus far. Since arriving here a month ago, he had done well to master the talk in Shin Nihon. However, he was still no closer to finding Shiri or a way back to Kyosei. He couldn't go around speaking about what he witnessed at the Manzai when everyone else was so hushed. He couldn't buy a gochin from Fushimi because he was still not a citizen in the capital. No basic income meant no money, and his time was running out. Those without ID in the capital for more than 3 months would be deported. Being on the free island with cats and Mori was much less cumbersome. Even though he wasn't making any dangerous moves, he could feel an ever-present lurking shadow. Once the AI found him overstaying his visit to Shin Nihon, they would realize there was nowhere to deport Chin, which then might lead to further examination, which would put his life at risk. His village would never see the freedom they deserved. After getting back to the apartment and jumping in the bath, Chin sat down on the bed next to Ari. "I'm going to send my book to the education center," Chin said to Ari as she laid Ka to sleep. Winter had begun, so the winter futon was brought out, and Ka was dressed in warmer clothing. "The education center at the AI Institute?" Ari asked, walking past Chin into the kitchen. "Yes, the human publishers I've brought it to so far have no eye for my stuff. The AI will have a deeper appreciation. Plus, they accept books of all kinds," Chin said. "But whatever the AI accepts directly is used solely to boost their brains," Ari said, taking milk out of the fridge. "I've heard of many an artist losing their swing selling themselves out to the AI. Is the exposure worth it?" "I am going to meet Shai," Chin said. Ari put the milk on the counter and stared at its label. The fridge was whispering to close its door. "I don't want to throw off the balance of the room temperature, so please close me up." At least it was considerate enough not to interrupt. She turned around. "Why?" Chin grimaced. He hadn't told Ari anything about his past since being with her, but he felt that it wasn't right to unload his burden on her. "I must meet him." Ari was silent for a while. She turned back to the milk and said, "You know, I can't do that journey with you." "I know. That is why I waited until Ka was asleep," Chin said softly in her ear as he embraced her from behind. Her shoulders were tight with tension. Ari turned around and held Chin's face with both hands, looking into his eyes. "Ka is my everything. I love you, but I will not put her in danger. Everything has been packed. I will leave tonight." Ari swallowed. Kissing him on the lips, she pushed back from his embrace and rested her hands on the counter. "Stay safe." Chin nodded and walked towards the door. He put on his coat, picked up his one bag, and turned to see Ari's face conflicted with sadness and decisiveness. "Nature lives within us. Never fight the change," he said, and walked out the door. Chapter 15. The next morning, Chin moved to the second safe house, set up by Mori, not too far away from the first. The design was similar, and in that way, comforting. After settling in, he mailed his only copy of Human Nature to the AI Institute. All he had to do was place the 100-page book on the 3D printer. It would scan it and print it at the AI Institute. Mori told him that Katz had configured all of the tech in the room himself, so he didn't have to worry about being tracked by the AI. He used the pen name Murakami Sora, which was just a mashup of the famous author. Murakami Haruki, and the Shin Nihongo word for sky. After doing that, he took a walk around downtown. He passed by people talking to their loved ones and friends via hologram, laughing their life away. How do they endure such mental slavery, he wondered. The people that lived on the free islands seemed released from this ever-present need to stay stimulated. They lived simple lives, and although they weren't advanced by society's new focus on developing themselves, they enjoyed their lives. The people in the capital, on the other hand, seemed to be reaching after an elusive great beauty. Through their constructed art world, they mimicked nature for the benefit of artifice. Eventually, their work became hollow. The music, paintings, and writing spoke nothing to everyone. Can I touch them? Number just one person. Can I touch just one person? With my book, he wondered as he passed by a family outside. The two same-sex parents played with their children as if nothing else existed. They had no screens and no devices. They only had each other. The two little girls moved as if water ran through their veins. Freedom. What does it take? Chin opened his apartment with facial recognition software, took off his shoes, and lay down on the bed after drinking a glass of water via pill. He stared at the blank ceiling. He could have turned on the integrated television that showed internets from the entirety of human history online, but he decided to think instead. All I can do is wait now. Chapter 16. The next morning, Chin spoke to the refrigerator, asking what was left inside. The fridge responded naturally in a young female voice. You seem to be okay for now. I recommend eating the leftover miso soup within the next 2 days though. Although Chin used the technology of the day with ease after Katz's thorough lessons, he still found it odd to be speaking to a machine. Thanks. Any news? Well, it seems that all of the news channels in the capital are pumping out raving reviews for a new book submitted to the AI Institute. It's called Human Nature and is written by a Murakami. Sora, thousands of copies have already been downloaded on devices and people are reading them on their holograms as we speak. Chin was speechless. He let out a small croak from the back of his throat, and the fridge took it as a sign to keep talking. Mostly people are reading the words as they listen to music for an immersive experience, but there has been a slight increase in the data pill form, she said. Chin remembered this type of learning from one of Katz's lessons. He could never forget the simplicity and sheer impossibility of learning through ingestion. Although there were some foreseeable side effects not quite worked out of the final product, he was surprised to see it so widely used. Katz had even given it one of his beard-blowing, exasperated sighs. Yardy, I can't keep up. Thank you, fridge. Please send me the AI Institute review via hologram. Don't you want to read the book first? No, please send the review. The fridge was making suggestions based on his past decisions. He had taken a few things out of the fridge, only to put them back unopened. Change of mind was recorded instantly and used to judge behavior for the next encounter. Such was the build of AI. Chin touched a random spot on the fridge, and a light appeared under his finger. With one swift move, he slid the light off the fridge and into the living room. Well, what one would usually deem the living room. It was a small apartment. A hologram with his book's bright yellow cover appeared. Above Human Nature was the title of the article, First Mandatory, Reading List Nominee of the Year. The subtitle read, Who is the mystery author? Records don't exist. What will happen next? In the hunt for the genius among us. Find out next in Chin couldn't bear to read the rest of the subtitle. Looks like sensationalism survived the AI revolution. A virtual reality simulation of the speech by the AI Institute. Board member, sure loaded in the apartment. Chin's mind was transported to the room of the conference. He felt like he was truly there, with the smell of sweaty armpits and incessant flashing shutters of cameras around him. He felt like he had a seat in the room. Shah's voice sat neatly in his ears as he began his speech. This is invasive, Chin thought. His first VR event was overwhelming him so far. Welcome. We are here to declare human nature as this year's top contender for the mandatory reading list. The work challenges our relationship with nature as transactional and not one of symbiosis. The author must be one of great intellect. We here at the AI Institute haven't received such prolific work in literature in a very long time. We implore the author to step forward. We would love to speak about the future. Shah looked around the room and hearing nobody respond. Into the live video, he said, "It's fine if you don't want to come forward via virtual reality. It is still a rather young technology." The room laughed. Chin could feel the energy rise and swell. There were some chuckles from others on VR call as well. "Murakami Sora, why don't you meet us at our office when you are free? We look forward to meeting you. Thank you." Shah stepped off the stage to a roaring applause and thousands of emojis and messages sent through instant messaging to be displayed to other VR users and people with their devices. Synced to the AI Institute's network, which meant everybody in the capital's downtown. Chin exited the simulation, ran into the bathroom and vomited. The miso soup from last night came up as he had eaten it. The yellow water was ornamented by a few green veggies. Wiping his mouth, he stared inside the toilet as it automatically flushed. "This is it, my chance," Chin confirmed to the yellow swirl. Chapter 17. "This suit doesn't fit well," Chin thought as he examined his cuffs. He stood outside Sher's office in the waiting room of the education center. There were a few other people in the room as well, but Chin couldn't observe them as closely as normal. He was sweating profusely and doing his best to suppress the hatred toward Shai he had bottled up for years. Of course, before he came, he had called Mori on a VR call too. Devise a plan. She had told him, "Calm down. Remember, this is the reason you went to the capital. The book was a ticket in. Your goal is to get back to Kyosei." Her police force years taught her much about persuasion. "Murakami Sora, you may come in now," a voice from the ceiling rang out. There was no secretary in the lifeless room. They too had been replaced by a control panel and hologram. The white space of the waiting room had a few plants in there, but again, synthetic. The curtains were whiter than the walls, and the sun coming in through the window made everything brighter. The room was almost made to distract and control the person waiting. Chin stood up and buttoned the top button of his suit. He walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The office felt much warmer than the waiting room. The dark brown earth tones of the walls and deep red curtains eased Chin's nerves. That was until he saw Shai. He sat on a mahogany chair in the middle of the room, facing the window through which sunlight poured in graciously. There was an empty chair of the same design directly next to him. Chin sat down. Silence ensued. "How long have you been here?" Shah asked, turning his body ever so slightly. The black suit he had on looked quite tight. It might have been exoskin material, which had temperature controls and muscle massage, but Chin wasn't sure. His hair was trimmed along a straight line across his forehead. His light brown skin seemed to be clean of all the scar tissue he had in Kyosei. His sly smile hung on his face as an ornament, the joy of technology. How did he know it was me? Chin thought. I felt your energy in the book while I read. It was as if I was speaking directly to you. I forgot of how good of a writer you had been in Kyosei. Chin saw red. He kicked back the chair violently, moved to the front of Sher, and grabbed his face with both hands. The anger must have made him stronger, because with both palms on Sher's face, he lifted him out of his chair. Although Chin had mental fortitude and a healthy body, he wasn't strong enough to crush somebody's face with his hands. Be that as it may, today, it seemed he had granted himself that strength. Go ahead, do what you must, Shai said in a muffled tone. Chin's brow furrowed even deeper. All of that murder, and now here too. Chin asked with his voice shaking. He never was good with anger. Well, yes, Shah said. Chin tightened his grip and threw Shi's face down onto the mahogany chair, breaking it into pieces. The room felt dark as the smell of his wife's blood came back to him. He would bring the same pain he had endured. She looked at Chin sitting atop of him. His eyes looked calm, as ever almost expectant. After I exterminated your village's people, this is the extent of your revenge. Chin knew what he was doing. His lessons with cats were extinguished with sheer rage. It was too late. He began bringing fist to Shah's face, the nose, eye sockets, mouth, cheekbones, and temples. Chin didn't stop until a tooth was lodged into his middle knuckle, grimacing from the pain and collecting himself through his. Panting, Chin looked down at Shi. Where his face was supposed to be laid a pile of flesh, dripping in red. His face looked like watermelon trampled upon by a herd of elephants. Even so, Chin didn't feel the least bit of satisfaction. Suddenly, as a leaky pipe spurting water, Shi's mouth opened, with splashes of blood on Chin's knees. Thanks. She pressed his forefinger and thumb together for a second, and Chin's body froze. He couldn't move one muscle in his body, and pain began emanating from the center of his spine. What is this? All of my organs feel like they're shutting down. He fell off of Shi, and his body began spreading out by itself. It was as if small insects had invaded his body and taken over. All of the voluntary and involuntary functions in his body had become domesticated. As Shi laughed and gargled, blood flew over his chin. Neurotransmitters. Did you forget to read the air? The waiting room, Chin thought. It had felt stuffy in that room, almost like the old AC units Mori used in her shop. Everything went black, but Chin was still conscious. He could feel everything too. The pain was excruciating. Cell by cell, he was being internally dissected, almost like acupuncture needles being used to strum one's nerves. Lightning ran from all over his body to his brain and back around again, a blacked-out body with the voltage of a thunderstorm. The door opened slowly, and Chin heard multiple people enter the room. Ever so quietly, they stepped over Chin's controlled mass of flesh and onto Shi. After a few grimaces and painful onomatopoeia, Shi seemed to stand up with the people that came in. They began to walk, and the steps seemed to make their way towards the door until they stopped. From what Chin could hear, they seemed to stop directly in front of his lifeless legs. Thank you for coming, Chin. Thick globs of blood and mucus fell onto Chin's leg from what must have been Shi's face. You saved me a lot of trouble. I'm saddened you won't be able to see. The change I bring to this world, rest well. Rest well? The feet continued out of the room. After the door closed, Chin felt the weight of the room. It felt like boulders from the highest. Mountains resting on the belly of a pregnant horse. Deflated, defeated, and utterly powerless. Nothing has changed. Chapter 18. The drip drop of infested water rang out through the prison for what seemed like months. The darkness and absolute solitude reminded Chin of his time on Founder Mountain. If he had not experienced those weeks alone to himself, being locked away, like this deprived of all human contact would have killed his soul. Sitting there while the drip drop wore away his concept of time, Chin became lost in his thoughts. He would lose his mind. In here, Shah knew it was me. He lured me out. Why did he announce their book if he knew? How will I get out of here? I probably won't. This is my end. I failed. Kyosei awaits a dark future. Writing that book had been an incredible triumph for Chin, overcoming his self-doubt and believing that he was enough. Human nature was his primal scream. As a ticket to see Shi, it served his purpose. But all of the former triumph was slowly being weathered away by this chamber. Rest well. How did he get stronger? In Kyosei, Shi had been smart enough to awaken fear in others. The Haku was a great warrior class, intelligent in tactics and strategy, and firmly built physically. Yet through manipulation, she rose to the top of the clan and used their prowess to take over all 9 kingdoms in the lands. Kyosei was the one kingdom never preyed upon by its neighbors, due to the impossible mountain range that made its borders. Even if the mountains were scaled, the villagers could easily find refuge in Founder Mountain. Only they knew the path through its suicide forest. Whoever lost themselves in the thicket of trees was spurred on to commit suicide. I have to get out of here. The people here resemble my people. They live under the burden of fear. She plays on their self-loathing. He uses their obedience to gain power for himself in Shin Nihon. And he plans to go beyond this country with the AI by his side. Suddenly, the wheel of the black metallic gate began to spin, and a series of whirring digital sounds rang out. He could see a hole being burrowed into the carbon nanotube door. Katz had told him that was the strongest material on the planet, but it seemed that was not the case. In the next moment, the hole was large enough for a hand to reach inside. The black-gloved hand held a small silver device. A red light beeped, and the door swung open. Light. Chin covered his eyes. "Ah, you are released," somebody said. Chin, still blinded, reactively said, "Why?" Silence. His sight began to return to him. In the entrance of the door stood a broad-shouldered woman. Behind her were 2 equally large women. Their stance, shoulder width, with their arms behind their back, looked sturdy and disciplined. They had round caps on their head with long ponytails touching their ankles, a law sure enforced for all military personnel. Just as their faces were coming into view, the 2 women moved faster than he could respond and scooped him up. "Let's go," the front woman said. They unchained the carbon nanotube rope around Shin's hands and legs and picked him up by each arm. Leaving the cell, they dragged him behind the front woman, exposing him to more bright lights. On top of that, he had not walked for what seemed like weeks. Time had completely escaped him despite his efforts. Standing on his feet sent shivers to his spine, and they returned limp to their molded tofu state. "Where is she?" Chin asked the front woman. His voice had no power, and it strained as he spoke, a brisk chop in the throat. Silently, the woman holding his right arm swung the blade of her right palm into his esophagus. He could taste blood. "Just listen," the front woman said, continuing to walk face forward. As the warmness of the blood covered his lips, he noticed the front woman's clothes. It was completely black with red outlining the edges, composed of silk. This was the uniform of the same group from the Rakugo Theater that night a few months ago. He remembered their laughter and how blood-curdling it had been. Even thinking about it brought back the pain in his eardrums. "Why do they want me?" Chin thought, clearing the fog in his throat. That time in the theater, they denounced Shy. Maybe they suspect I'm in alliance with him. Do they know my past? But how? I have no form of identification and stayed low since I've been here. The only time I've been public with my actions is the interview at the institute, which landed me here. The book. Chin racked his brain to loosen any lessons from Katz. Then it came. Katz had used a book called No Self, Who We Are, which had been written by a group that used laughter as a weapon. They were all female. The Karakera Ana, the Amazonians from the theater, must have known I was there. Katz had told him, "If you ever meet them, speak straight. If not, they'll laugh. Their laugh has been said to incite organ failure and death if performed at length. As a rebel group, they slide through the capital unseen, monitoring the balance between AI and humans. As always, Katz had left out all of the most pertinent information for the listener to decipher for themselves. How can they hide from the omnipresent AI? Do they, just like the AI, understand no self? It was as if cats had said, "Figure it out." Even staring at the back of the flowing coattail of the woman who walked in front of him, he didn't have the mental capacity to figure it out. Being in a dark room with repetitively dripping water was great for meditating, but once self-doubt crept in, the mind burst at its seams. The bounce of the muscular woman lulled his busted brain to sleep. All I can do now is wait. Chapter 19. Who are you? Chin slowly opened his eyelids. This time, a dully lit room with 4 lanterns perched on the walls. The room looked like a medieval torture chamber. Despite that, he was sitting in a comfortable chair and untied. He was surrounded by what seemed like a group of Karakara honor members. Standing in a half-circle formation, their black and red robes stood out even. In the dark, their gaze suggested seriousness, as if he could burn a hole in one's eyeball just from staring. Chin straightened his posture. Who are you? Mind you, we don't ask questions more than once, a shapely, tall member said. She stood directly next to the woman who had walked in front, while Chin was being extracted. But she looked fiercer. I am a spokesperson for nature, Chin said. The tall interrogator briefly looked at who was, presumably, the leader, and then focused back on Chin. What is your name, and where are you from? My name is Chin. I am from Kyosei, a village in the 3rd century BCE. We know what Kyosei is, the interrogator said. All of the members let out a belting, high-volume laugh. The tones were so powerful, some soil from the ceiling trickled down as sand in an hourglass. Chin could feel an unusual burn erupting. From his core, suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his stomach. Speak straight, Chin told himself, grimacing as he held his ears. We are descendants of Kyosei villagers. Our diminishing group holds knowledge that predates the AI revolution. We figured you and Shai are of the same feather, the interrogator said. Chin nodded through the pain. There was no pending question, so no answer was necessary. We, too, have ancient blood running through us. Because of this connection, the AI are not able to completely read our thoughts, biology, or emotions. Their third eye allows them to see all that they know, but what they do not know threatens them. That is why you saw them attack Ocarina and UEP here. That night at the theater, the 2 women that had materialized out of thin air that night stepped from the back of the group to stand next to the interrogator. They looked unscathed and still serious as before. Although they weren't wearing suits this time, Chin couldn't forget their piercing eyes. Anyway, we could use your help. As you may know, Shai uses his education center to deepen the censorship the AI Institute monitors. That's why your book was called out in broad daylight. She knew you would attack him. Use that attack as PR too. Compel the public to vote for your imprisonment. It allows him more control as the people begin to trust in him. And don't think he hasn't known of your time on the Free Islands. You two are connected more than you know. What do you want me to do? Chin asked. Shah is out for power. With AI and a brainwashed public, Shin Nihan will soon be his. Next, the world. Who thought world domination would be had by a 3rd century? Before common era war leader, Chin thought. The leader continued. As you and Shai come from the same time, you are invisible to the AI. Basically, your part of history was never uploaded. The AI will watch and listen to you until they know you down to your atoms, just as they do with Shai for now. The leader paused to brush her hair behind her ear. The AI are superior to us in every facet, but they are still subject to human curiosity because their data is comprised of our experiences. They hunger for it at every turn. So you want me to enter the AI Institute and garner the AI's attention? Chin asked. Exactly. They will not attack you as they did us, because you are a blank slate. We, however, have parts of our DNA that follow. The AI revolution, the leader said. How do I know you aren't throwing me into the lion's pit? Chin asked. The original art of war had helped sharpen his intuition. The leader's smile stiffened the air. Chin thought he saw the fire flash briefly. You are right. She raised 2 fingers, and 2 black-robed women with cloths covering everything but their mouths Doots the Guchin. Chin held his urges. He knew that any sudden movement could mean his life would be laughed away. Be that as it may, the more he looked, the more familiar he felt with the instrument. Recognize this? The dull, off-white silk strings, the earth-green tassels. Hanging from the helm, the black-as-coal painted wood body. The leader took her middle finger and plucked the 4th string from the bottom. He closed his eyes and remembered his life. In Kyosei, living with Midori, advising the villagers on nature, and growing up under Baba. Although it was dark, Chin could tell from the tone that this was his Guchin, the very Guchin that had brought him to this world, that fateful day on Founder Mountain. How did you get this? I saw it go, Yardi, the leader said, while taking off her red cap, revealing luscious thick locks that reached just below her hips. Chin sat there with his head imploding. As you may have been thinking, I am Katz's younger sister, Blue. On closer inspection, she shared the same dark skin pigment, powerful eyes, and overwhelming presence as her brother. She stood tall as him too, but amongst the other Karakira honor members, she looked average. Even so, her frame was thick but athletic. She had long legs, and her torso sat nicely on top of sturdy hips. She looked physically stronger than Katz, and her resolve was more focused. Katz taught me everything about this world, Chin said, regaining his composure for the first time since they had brought out the Guchin. Katz and I grew up in Hokkaido in a small mountain village that honored knowledge. In a word, we were constantly exploring the world through books. Eventually, Katz and I left for the capital, and we worked on the first theories of AI with Kanako Musk. A young woman came from the entrance behind the group and whispered into Blue's ear. She quickly turned to Chin. I have gotten so caught up in catching you up that we've run out of time. You must go now. Chin looking at the Guchin and said, once I enter the institute, how do you know they will listen? Because they have never heard the authentic instrument before. Let's say hypothetically that I do capture their attention. What can I do then? My music cannot kill Shy. Of course, that is why you must give the AI reason to kill Shy. That might have been the only option in your time, but murder hasn't been committed internationally for 20 years now. Chin thought this over deeply. She mentioned that they watch and learn until they understand. Then why did the AI react like that the night at the theater with Ari? Why would the AI kill She if I appear? Unbeknownst to you, she's been by their side for close to a year, Blue said unhurriedly, yet with purpose to end the conversation. They have been playing him for a couple of months now, waiting for something more intriguing to take their attention, and that is you. Chin waited for her to finish. Once you show them that you too can fill in their knowledge gap, they will reconsider their allegiance to Shy. Despite the difficulty, we've been tracking Shi's movements. His time is limited and he knows this. That's why he is mobilizing internationally. He is the source of all of my pain, but inciting revenge for. Kyosei will not bring my people back. What benefit do I get out of this? Chin asked. Well, as you can see, not only have we not tied you up, but we have released you from the mental torture of an AI Institute prison. I'll also throw in the Guchin to sweeten the deal, the very object that we used to bring you here. Chin lost all thought. His mind froze, considering the fact that this rebel group created his beloved Guchin to tear him away from his village. At first he felt anger, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. His father had made a Guchin for Baba, as a tool for one to see reality as it was. When Chin took it to Founder Mountain, where his dad had built the Guchin during his own pilgrimage, he had let go of all desire, accepting death as the reality. He had faced his mortality willingly, and as a result, the Guchin warped him to this time. The tool they used? My father built that, Chin said coldly. Of course. And as with all ancient relics, humankind protected and maintained his legacy. But when my brother and I saw the onset of the AI revolution as a threat to human achievement, we took this piece of history and used it to explore the past. Chin thought for a moment. The data travel used by those two. In the theater, pointing at Ocarina and UEP, he realized his finger had stopped shaking. He was regaining strength. Very nice. Cats taught you well. Yes, we used the data travel you saw to transport history's first Gukin, your father's namesake, back to your time. The night before you embarked on your pilgrimage to Founder Mountain, we replaced the Gukin. With this one, Blue said. I will do it, but after this. But never touch my Guchin again, Chin said. Blue smiled and motioned for some uniforms to move and clot him. Chapter 20. The New Year's festival was taking place in the public gardens. Frost covered the statue of Kanako Musk in front of the AI Institute. She looked quite grand in the dead of winter. Red lanterns lit up the white snow as taiko drums reverberated. Through the air, the trees were naked and raised their branches upwards, searching for warmth. This is the perfect stage for Shi's death, Chin thought. Karakira Anna was of course moving in the shadows while Chin sifted through the crowd in his festival garb. He wore the female no mask that he had received from Mori, along with an earth green happy with the character for Guchin written on the back. The electric lantern drones floated freely through the air. A thin red haze floated above the mass of moving heads. Everybody was loud and excited. After all, the festival was the most human of activities. If one looked closely enough, little cameras could be spotted within the kanji written on the lanterns. These were the tools the AI used to capture the amazingly human moments that would happen tonight. It was their form of reconnaissance. Chin concentrated on the task at hand. He moved forward through the bobbing heads and sweaty bodies, moving in rhythm. The feeling was a sensation he hadn't experienced in a while, the feeling of enjoying one's life fully. The ability to let oneself go in the energy of the moment had remained elusive. During his time so far in Shin Nihon, today I will define myself in this new world, Chin thought. Blue had told him that his mission was to get to the center of the public gardens before most of the crowd. That way he would get a front row view of the AI performance with Sher making an opening statement. That would be the moment when Chin would begin playing the Guchin placed in the park. Chin heard some women who looked to be in their 30s talking behind him. I heard something big is happening today. Oh yeah? Are the AI going to outdo last year's performance? That would be amazing. No, I think that group has something in the works. The oldest one, with the red chopsticks running through her. Buns made a laughing gesture, holding her stomach and her face upward to the sky. After glimpsing this, Chin felt that he had seen her before. You think they still exist? There's no way. The AI extinguished that era. Who knows? It's just what I heard. Well, you are listening to the wrong people. Yeah, I mean, if they were to start something tonight, it would just make things harder for us. The older woman shrugged, and the three women returned to talking about other things. Chin continued his walk through, the bustling human crowd doing his best to reach the front of the massive gathering, passing by the steaming stalls of takoyaki, frank wieners, and soba. He realized how transient life was, peaks of human celebration in between long stretches of subservient behavior. Who is stopping you? There is nobody in front of you but you. Get out of the way. All of this beauty around him, only to be relegated to the halls of fleeting human triumph. Chin didn't want this for Kyosei or any human group for that matter, where he saw an absence of standing for oneself. He realized that nobody was going to do it for him. Chapter 21. Here we are, gathered today for another successful year of human achievement. Sure stood on stage with a singular black mic attached to his tongue. It was so small that one could only see it up close. The same mic that was used at the conference announcing Human Nature's release. Without a need for speakers, the mic allowed the orator to emit radio waves that directed the hair follicles in the ear specifically. The AI had developed the technology to make communication more intimate for humans. That was about as much as Chin knew. More importantly, Chin noticed that Sher's face looked completely new, as if Chin's fist hadn't met his flesh weeks ago. Today we celebrate our solidarity with each other and AI. There were resounding cheers throughout the gardens. Any doubtful murmurs were quickly buried under the enthusiasm. The AI are teaching us more about our humanity, day in and day out. Kanako Musk has brought us the greatest restructuring of our society to date. Although the technology is still singular, to Shin Nihon, we will be the world's beacon of light. Here and now is how we decide to manifest our lives. We could spend it reveling in our own mediocrity. This is the formula we have, followed for centuries. Or we could provide for our keeper, the AI. They are better at being human than us even. The crowd laughed, the laughter of lovers, confidants, family, all in the hands of this sociopath. Chin rubbed his neck in discomfort. The AI holds us inside of their veins. Do not be mistaken, my people. This is not robots dominating humankind. This is humankind facing itself. This is the dawn of a new humankind. Chin thought the uproar would rupture his eardrums. Let us celebrate this night together, in harmony, human with... Ayashi raised his arms in triumph of the crowd and the AI members of the AI Institute. Behind him stood in unison. From the center of the crowd, a taiko group emerged, and the soundproof dome illusion was shattered with the thunderous knock of the cow skin. Boom, boom! Sure speaks to the human condition. He knows the people hate themselves every day for creating the AI. He preys on their self-loathing to push his own agenda. They dare not challenge the false superiority of the AI because they see themselves as ants. You are right. This is humankind facing itself. Except they turn away from the mirror. This fodder is orchestrated and real. Tonight, it ends. Chin stood still amongst the waves of human celebration. He was the stone in the wave, unmoved by its force from greater depths. He knew well what it felt like to be caught in the glory of forfeit. He knew well the feeling of giving into his fears. This was that feeling. A lone brown leaf landed at his feet. He picked it up. It soon crumbled between his fingers. I have subjected myself to my own fears. I had moments on moments to conquer myself and take back Kyosei, but I stood frozen. The violence I witnessed spurred on plenty of my village people, albeit to their deaths. Yet I, with so much professed love of my people, did nothing. For what? My own salvation? My own well-being? Chin looked at the life before him. People melted into those that stood next to them. Sweat dripped from faces into mouths. Flesh rubbed inconspicuously, and taiko drums sang the beat of human ecstasy. The AI on stage looked on with ravenous eyes. Sher sat in his seat amongst the board with the same sly smile. Chin saw in Katz's newspaper a year ago. He looked as a young catwood playing with its dead prey in its paws. Chin knew what he had to do. Quickly moving around the gyrating bodies, he made his way to the center of the crowd from the front. Cutting his thumb with his teeth until he bled, he rubbed the blood down the forehead of his mask. This activated the Kera Honor's stone. Chin could see the green tassels emerge from the stone as he slid through the crowd. Of course, the volume of the festival drowned out his tones. The people could not hear it, but the AI heard everything. The entirety of the AI Institute board, 4 members in total, stood to their feet. The crowd, lost in their own fervor, did not stop the party. Chin looked up again, and he noticed the stage was empty. Suddenly, the taiko drums stopped ringing throughout the air. It's starting, Chin thought. Chin's fingers kept stringing the silk without restraint. He could feel the creep of the AI through the mist of murmurs floating above the crowd. His mind went silent and still. A clearing formed around the stone Chin sat atop. The grass that had been crushed under the feet of the crowd, reflexively, inched back to its original position like trees that had been moved momentarily by the wind. The tones of the guqin rendered the festival silent. Only the dying tones colored the air. One could hear the heart beating. Chin's eyes closed. He could feel the glare of only she under the stars. Their paths had crossed millennia ago, and now, in this moment, they stood amongst bodies from a different era. Their flesh and bone had been manifested in an age of rawness. Chin stood as primordial soup, wetting the souls of a primate. Yet they had come to this world and bore their own sense of humanity. She just happened to be on the wrong side of that coin. Chin abruptly stopped his luscious stringing, placing both hands flat on the strings. He stood on top of the stone and rang out a cackling laugh. Across the field from the stage emerged Blue and her companions, causing the crowd to erupt in a frenzy. Karakira, they've been here all along. Why? What should we do? Doubt ran hot through the crowd's pulse. The AI looked expressionlessly at the stage and moved quickly through the crowd towards the front. Shure's sly smile faded, and his gaze set upon Chin fiercely. Chin stood there unabated, looking back into She's. Blue and her team belted out another laugh, and suddenly a wall of blue light encircled the stage, forming a light dome. Upon closer investigation, one could see lines of code running through these blue streams of light. One AI touched the stream of light with a pointer finger, and immediately seized up and dropped to the floor, out of order. While the remaining AI processed the event, learned, and analyzed the AI's systems with their eye-scanning technology, the crowd looked on in utter shock. The AI can be killed? It's dead. What if we touch that thing? A broad-shouldered AI with long black hair said, "They have reversed our code and constructed a virus. We cannot survive contact." Sure, still staring at Chin, nodded his head. My mic seemed to be effective as a walkie-talkie system too. He stepped closer to Chin. "You're more resourceful than I." Thought Chin stood motionless. The anger was coming again, this time molten white. He wanted nothing more than to plunge his hand into Shah's chest, piercing his heart with his bare fingers. Murder lingered on his breath. During our last encounter, I forgot to mention something. Even after killing everyone in the village, save the most skilled farmers, Kyosei had become part of my empire. Yet I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. The villagers told me of your search for enlightenment. Sure walked ever closer to Chin, kicking up small stones as he approached. The tension in the air could have suffocated a bird. There, two men from antiquity stood eye to eye, sharing all of their disgust for each other whilst holding back their incessant rage. One of them was held by their appetite for domination, the other held by his compassion. Both of them reacting to fear of the unknown, fear of not being worth anything, fear of insignificance, the timeless human search for meaning. I have been patiently waiting for this moment, Chin said. Sure nodded with his sly smile. Chin sat back down on his stone, slid the mask over his face, and began strumming his guqin again. She stood there incredulously. "What is this?" "Escape," she said loudly over the tones. The people surrounding the two started to relax their features and their body language. Seeing and hearing the two interact had brought them to tears. The group of three women, who seemed to be pondering the night's chain of events, whispered amongst themselves. "I don't know what language that is, but the one on the stone stood his ground," the elderly one said, holding her neck. "Yeah, just before that, his eyes kinda scared me. I thought he was going to kill Shai right there. He must be working with the Karakira. Did you hear that? Laughed before, there's no doubt about it." The tension in the air seemed to dissipate after Chin began. Playing. The women spoke lightly. Sher turned to the group and began striding towards them. Did he hear us? What should we do? He's coming straight at us. Sher walked up directly to the oldest woman, grabbed her by the neck collar, and dragged her into the center of the circle. Chin flinched as he played, but kept his focus. It was not his place to act. The AI were still near the stage, staring at the Karakira, honor behind the code shield, until they sensed something from Sher, his ego climbing to dangerous heights. The crowd was silent. The lanterns moved oddly with the wind. Only the stars spoke. With a swift move, Shai took the chopstick out of the woman's hair bun and stuck it in the bottom part of her trachea from the front. The woman let out a piercing scream that lasted for all of a second as the air was blocked in her throat. Her eyes rolled out of control and her body squirmed in panic. Chin could see the contortion of the face in the most horrid of expressions. Through the eye slits on his mask, memories of his wife flashed across his mind's eye, jarring his senses. Shaking his head, he funneled the pain into the strings. She then shoved the chopstick upwards until it disappeared into the woman's neck. She collapsed face forward onto the ground. He slowly raised his head upward and peered at Chin, who was still playing. The people around him looked startled, but remained calm. This was the Guchin at work, now the tree. AI board members were scattered amongst the crowd, slowly making their way to the clearing. What? You have never seen death before your eyes? This is the natural cycle of human life, Sher screamed. The other two women in the group that had just lost their friend were crying. Oddly enough, even they did not panic. They were showing their respects. The youngest one in the group stepped forward, her white dress lightly flowing from the wind. With her black hair wrapped up in a bun, she released the hair from its captivity and sat on the ground just as Chin did on the stone. She closed her eyes and sat still as the tears rolled down. Her face and sobs were squeezed out of her pursued lips. Sher looked down at her with the rage of murder still pulsing through his veins. Chin's strums bled out his incessant panting. Sher slowly walked over to the woman, rubbing his hands on his clothes as if to cleanse himself of the murder just before. Just as he reached close enough to grab her bun, a large man stepped forward from the crowd and sat in the same position. Eyes closed. Suddenly, 3 people across the clearing did the same. Soon enough, the entire clearing began adopting this position silently. Eventually, only she and the AI stood in the gardens. The woman AI that had made the report about the code shield said, "This is civil disobedience at work." What do they expect from this type of defiance? Shai scoffed. "Freedom," the AI said. Chin's fingers hit the silk strings as if he was drumming. He looked like he had in Founder Mountain. The air around him began to change. He could feel the spaces between each particle, and he could see himself in them. He was everything. There was one line in No Self that stood out to him. Nothing lasts. He looked up briefly to see the gardens populated by tens of thousands of people sitting. Complete silence. Even the AI had. Their eyes closed, listening, taking in the moment. Only Shai stood there by himself, sweat dripping from the crest of his nose. His sly smile had disappeared, and his brow furrowed. His broad shoulders kept their steady pace of up, down, up, down. Through the slits of the mask, Chin saw the defeated look on Sher's face, clear as day. After all of these years of violence and domination, he did not know what to do with those that resisted. Through non-action, it was almost as if peace baffled him. Suddenly, there was a hot surge from the bottom of Chin's spine to his brain. His fingers moved on the strings as if they were detached. His brain, no, his consciousness, was separating from his body. He had no thoughts. All he could feel was being. The last image he saw was that of the AI encircling an alone Shai. Fear gripped his face. Insignificance, loss. the natural cycle of life to death. The world melted away. As Chin regained a sense of where he was, he saw his wife's eyelids in the dark, the silk sheets, the moonlight shining into the room through the wooden door, the cicada playing their soundtrack of the summer night. I am back. I've reached Kyosei, Chin thought as he broke down, uncontrollably in his hands. How I've missed you, my love. You never left my mind for a day. The moonlight streaming into the room seemed to pierce his chest as if he laid atop a bed of 1,000 spearheads. I'm back. Chapter 22. Just as Chin began to get his bearings, a panting, bloodied man appeared in the doorway. Chin wiped his tear-streaked face and stood up from the bedside. He was ready and determined. This time, I'll do it right. I won't lose you again, he thought, looking at his wife's resting face. Over the next few days, when the man fell asleep, Chin held private meetings with the rest of the village. He felt pieced together by reuniting with his fellow villagers, greeting them with elation and graciousness. He explained at length the presence of a Haku in his house. The scrolls hadn't convinced them before, but seeing an outsider in the flesh was enough to kick people into gear. He mentioned nothing of Shin Nihan, but somehow the other villagers could see he was changed. Maybe it was his voice or the way he carried himself, but he seemed driven by a purpose. The people of Kyosei were keen observers of nature, and as such they reacted well to change. They listened to Chin's warning, and on the supposed day of the attack, they all evacuated the village to Founder Mountain. On the fateful night in Chin's empty house, the man and Chin sat close together and began speaking of their drawings. Just as before, the man took the painting, walked to the entrance of the house, and blew his horn. He would now take Chin hostage until Sure arrived. Soon enough, a massive herd of Haku atop horses came pouring over the mountains. Chin feigned the fear he had felt that night as he undressed his gukin. The man holding him hostage looked at Sure as he entered the room. Sure's expression threw the man into an anxious tremble. What is this? Sure asked without gracing him with his gaze. I've brought you this village, just as you've asked. I almost died climbing those mountains. Now let me return to my family, the man said, shaking the knife in Chin's direction. He's not Haku, Chin observed concerned. Did Sha use him? Village, there is no one here. What? That can't be. Sha walked up to the man swiftly, took his hand, and plunged the knife into his chest. As he turned the blade, squeezing the last breath out of the man, Chin began strumming the guqin. Despite its low volume, the tones rang throughout the empty village all the way up to Founder's Mountain. This was his only chance. Sure looked at Chin intensely. He sat down and began to listen to the strange instrument. The two warrior men standing at the entrance too sat and listened. Chin's left hand smothered the plucks from his right, the sound of reality disappearing as sand falls through one's fingers. Everything but Sure's internal organs ceased to exist in Chin's mind. The three men before him closed their eyes. At that moment, Chin continued plucking with his right hand as he grabbed the seventh string in the middle and pulled it back until it reached the third string or so. He had loosened the end where the seventh string was tied the night before. He was holding it at its highest tension now. The wind outside stopped and the moon stared at Chin. Goodbye, Chin thought. He released the seventh string, and in an instant, deep red, blood poured out of Shai's open throat. The end of the string had come undone from the body, and like the force of lightning striking the top of a mountain, the string had struck a meditating Shah sitting just a meter away. The monster didn't have a chance to savor his last breath. The flow of blood from his throat was plentiful, plentiful enough to sever the last bit of flesh that kept the head on the body. A few seconds passed as the body still sat, and the head rolled off the top. The two men opened their eyes to the thud. Thank you for your attention. I never know if my playing falls on attentive ears or not, but today Your leader seems like he especially enjoyed it. The two burly men reached directly for the sheets on their hips. But wait, I just saved you two from the most savage man in our history. You two must have seen how he treated his men, Chin said with open body language. The two men looked at each other and inched closer to Chin, with their hands still on their sheaths. What about a different future? Chin asked inquisitively. Not. Budging from behind the Guqin. Now that She is dead, all of the kingdoms in our age have fallen upon a single soul. Me, he said, pointing to his nose. The men stopped and listened. What this means is that you will be attacking your leader if you continue forward. Although I am not as gruesome as Shai, I do not take treason lightly, he said, with a serious tone. Thanks for the psychology lesson, cats. Yes, men do speak the language of loyalty, he thought. The two men again looked at each other for confirmation, shook their heads, bowed before Chin, and left the hut to gather the rest of the men. Chin looked down at his broken Guqin and smiled. A Suetgo. Over the next few months, Chin came into complete control of all of the kingdoms surrounding Kyosei. She had been busy, but uncompassionate. So, Chin decided to implement Nature Lives Within Us across the territories as imperial edict. Through thoughtful leadership and a focus on self-mastery, Chin brought the scattered kingdoms together and formed the first unified dynasty of what is known today as China, except he called it Kyosei. What a thing.